Welcome to the channel. In this video, I'm going to show you step by step how we created this workflow automation guide here from this template after a prospect fills out this form. So these are the data points using this backend integration. So I'm going to show you step by step how this integration is built, how we use Airtable, all the prompts, all the learnings, everything. I'm giving it all away for free. I hope you get value from this video. So let's get started. Welcome. In this video, I am going to show you how to create AI generated documents. Specifically in my case, I'm going to show you how to create a workflow automation guide that is about 90% generated by AI. Here's the workflow for it. But more broadly, what we're talking about is AI generated documents. So as I'm going through this step by step, I'm not going to skip any steps. You're going to walk away with knowledge to build the exact same document that I've built, and that'll be helpful for you. And I'm not going to leave out any steps. It's no gatekeeping. It's all wide open. However, everyone has different needs. So as I'm going through this video, I want you to think about, are you trying to create custom lead magnets, maybe certificates, reports, reviews, resumes, proposal? This same concept applies to everything. Essentially, you have specific content or information either in a database or you are asking for that information. You're going to push it through a language model like Claude or ChatGPT, and then the results of that you're going to populate into a template. So let me get started and kind of show you what I've done and exactly how I've done it. Now, I will say some of this is, well, this has all been built before. I actually recorded this video and, it didn't have sound. So I had to re-record it. However, I had already rebuilt the integration. So I'm going to kind of fast track through this one a little bit, still giving you all the details, but just a little backstory for you. So let me show you my guide. So in my workflow automation guide, one of the goals was, hey, I want to be able to give my existing clients and leads and upcoming and new prospects something of value that they could have. So I have some knowledge in an industry that I've been in for quite a while. How can I give them something of value that they could use whether or not they decide to use my services? So my thought was a workflow automation guide lead magnet. So they give me a little bit of information, I give them something of value, and then I check in later on and see if they had any questions, and I get to know more about the people at the top of my funnel. So what I did is I created a form, and this form is just a generic form. This is particularly HubSpot actually, but it's just a form someone would fill out, give me information. They would tell me about their name, email, company, description of services, problems, right? Like what are the problems you have in your domain or industry? Now, if we could solve those problems, what does that cost you? Or what's that worth to you? I asked that. Then I said, when do you need it? When would you like this solved? Now or sometime in the future. I also said, hey, what services are you potentially interested in? And this was the options that I provided. And then how skilled are you? And, 1 versus beginner and 5 expert. And how involved you want to be. So I asked a number of questions. And then when they fill these questions out, it goes through the workflow I'm going to show you and basically generates this guide. So it generates a custom guide specifically for that person. Let me just show you when I said 80%. Here's the actual template. So the template has these variables in it, these sections. This stuff is not variable driven, although it could be, but it's not variable driven. And this last part where I talk about particular resources, the whole point of this guide is, hey, here's what you want. Here's where you start. Here's the effort it's going to take. Here's some additional automations that could be useful for you. And the thing you want built based on your information you give us right here, this is the resource that we think is perfect for you. And I give, if it's not right for an agency, it's not. We're an agency, but hey, it might be someone internal. This is small. You said you want to learn. You have a good skill. You should build it yourself. Here's the pros and cons. Or maybe a freelancer is a better option for you than an agency at this point in your journey. So I will tell them what resource and give them the value proposition based on that. So that is the guide template that I used and I created. And let me just show you the workflow again. So in this workflow that I'm going to do with you as a demo, this is going to be an Airtable landing page. The information is going to get dumped into Airtable. We're going to push it through GPT. Then we're going to add all the information to a Google slide template. Then the guide will be downloaded, updated. Airtable is so in this workflow, I don't want to just send out an automation guide without checking it first. I have noticed, at least when you're doing dynamic lead magnets, about 20% of the form submissions are nonsensical. It's just people curious and they're not putting in real information. And so I have like a validation step where I'm looking in the database at the information they give me. And based on what they're giving me, I'm checking a box and saying, hey, go ahead and send it to them, or no, this isn't legit. So that's kind of my process, and I'm going to kind of bake that in and show you how that works. So this is the Airtable database. So it's one table. In this table here, you will see I've just got fields that match exactly this form. So John Doe, first name, last name, email, the status of the submission, company name, description. I just did a generic description for this one. Needs. Now, when you're creating this yourself, you'd simply just go to Airtable, create a blank table, and you could just name it the fields that it's weird. You could just name it the fields that I have here. So you could just click here. Everything is pretty much a string field. There's three types. I got string fields, which are these A fields, single line text. I've got description fields, which are long text. Needs are long text. I've got budget, which is a drop down of these options. I've got delivery, which is a single select of these options. I've got skills, which is a rating of maximum of 5. How involved are these three options here. I've got services, which are these 4 questions. And then I have a generated lead magnet link, and then kind of like an approved step. And then I have 3 statuses. So by default, something comes in as new. And then what happens is I have it where the minute a submission comes in, it does go ahead and generate the document and then puts it in ready review status. Technically, I could put it in review status, maybe like a pre-step, so that I don't even have to waste the AI tokens on like a nonsensical response. So depending on how busy your form's going to be, that might be something to consider, because you will get people that will say, hey, this custom lead magnet, they're just going to put in data. It doesn't make sense. So anyways, these are my form fields. And from there, I have a form that I populated. So I clicked here and I just clicked create a form. I already have a new leads form, but essentially this is what I did. I just created a form and it automatically adds all these fields that I can then publish, and I can share this form link with anyone on the web. And this might be on my website or given out to people. Now, the default form has stuff I don't want them to know about. So I'm like, okay, cool. I might want to ask first name, last name, email. I'm not going to ask them about status. We can remove that. Company name, description, needs, budget, delivery. There's some fields missing here, which is interesting. And I probably wouldn't name I might say delivery, but I might give it a different title or description kind of to match this so that they know what the questions are. Other than that, I see that it didn't ask about the skills and it didn't ask how involved they want to be and the services they're interested in. So I'd publish this form and then I could fill out the information. And I could actually do that now. So let me go to data. Actually, I'll do it later during our test, but essentially, they'll fill the information out. It'll look just like this. Now from this step, this is our landing page database setup step. Now we're in the Airtable step. Now in this Airtable step, the only thing we're going to do, we've got the information from the client. We just want to mail it over to Make. So essentially, this automation is the automation that I'm going to show you that I created step by step. This is the automation that actually generates this lead magnet and makes it available for the client or whoever your prospect is. So what we need to do is when someone fills this out, we're just going to send a webhook over to Make to start the automation. So this is that clipboard address of webhook, and just in case you're not familiar with Make at all, let's see. If I just create a new scenario and just say webhook, this is what I'm doing here is I'm just creating a webhook. Now, I also will have a link for like the full blueprint, so you can just import it into your solution. But anyways, from a step-by-step perspective, I started with a webhook, and then from there, you'll see the names of the modules underneath. So I'm using Airtable, get a record, and so on and so forth. So the step that we need to do is we need to go in automations here in Airtable and basically set up an automation to send this data over to our Make integration so the document can generate. So we'll click on automations, and there's two of them. One is called Generate Lead Magnet, and all I did with Generate Lead Magnet is I went to create automation. I added a trigger of when a form is submitted, and I'm going to say the table is leads and the form is new leads. And then I'm going to choose a record because it's going to want a record for testing. And I just clicked on this record. The next step is, okay, great. When a form is submitted, trigger this. And I want to send the record ID over to Make. So I'm going to click on Run Script here. And I'm going to get rid of all this stuff. And actually, I'm going to go, I'll show you what to do. One other thing is I have a link that's going to have access to this document. So I have all this in here, but here's the Airtable webhook. You'd click this and then you'd go here, go back into that edit code, and you're going to populate this script. You're going to see some squigglies because this JavaScript isn't attached to anything, but we want to send. Actually, I'll just explain each line. So input config is an Airtable specific function that allows you to pass data from the script caller. So I can add a variable here and call it record ID. And notice this goes away because I'm basically creating a variable of the input config function. And then I'm creating a variable of the webhook address, which we would go to make and we'd say, hey, what's your webhook address? It's this? Okay, great. Let's copy this address. Actually, I'll do a new one here. I'm going to copy this address. I'm going to run this. I'm going to go back over to make and I'm going to say, or Airtable, and I'm going to say this is the address. And I've got my record ID. Here's my query param, and we're basically going to say, hey, code snippet, fetch data from this webhook. It's not going to really fetch anything. We don't actually care about return payload in this example, but it is going to hit that endpoint and pass in the input config record ID, which is here. Now, technically, the second step in my automation, I'm grabbing the proper Airtable variables and mapping them that way, but you could actually pass in all the variables here. That would just be a slightly more complex JavaScript, and I don't normally do that only because usually when I'm building something, if I forget or add a variable, it's a lot easier for me just to map it to Airtable with a rerun than it is to like go into JavaScript and pass variables and stuff. Anyways, digress. This is what we do. We test it. And then, where am I? Here you go. We get the record ID. And then here, that second step is cool. We're going to go to Airtable and we're going to get that record. So that's when we're going to say, here's our AI lead magnet base. Here's our leads table. I'm going to pass in the record ID here. And so now we've got this two-step process. If you rerun the test, we'll go back to the integration and we got the ID, and then great, we have all of our data, and now we can start to build the integration. So that pretty much completes this step, and now we kind of are in generate content mode. So let me show you how that works. Essentially, in generate content mode, here's what I'm doing. Well, first let me talk about OpenAI. If you don't have an OpenAI account, you just go to openai.com. You'll notice there's multiple products, ChatGPT or API. We want API. So the pricing for this type of integration is pretty cheap, but we want API login. Let's just look at pricing. I don't know how old this video is going to age, but here's kind of the pricing that you have for input tokens or whatnot. When you anytime you run an API call, you can kind of look and see token usage too. But I mean, this doesn't really give you much context, so I don't even know why I showed that. Anyways, we'll just say it's cheap for now. You go here, you create an account, and once you create an account, you're going to be able to log in. Now I'm going to log in to the API. And your step that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to create an assistant. So what I did is I clicked on assistants and I created, you just go here and you just create an assistant. You give the assistant a name and you give it instructions. So in our example, and actually it might be in here. Yeah, it was James, the AI lead magnet expert. So I created an assistant on ChatGPT's platform. I'm going to give him some instructions of who he is. You generate workflow automation guides, give it some information, who I'm looking for, and whatever, just some general information I give it. Now, this is where we get into other features. You could add files and do all kinds of things to give this assistant more information. But for this guide, this is all I gave it at the beginning. So then once I gave the guide that information, when I go here, my first step is I want to generate ideas. So the first thing I do is I want to, in this workflow automation guide, give them ideas of things that would be related to their business, right? So in this example, I believe this is like a window cleaning company. And so because the system knows this, the integrations are kind of semi around that, right? Like, oh, weather-based scheduling reschedules appointment, bad weather. That might be a thing if you're doing outdoor window cleaning. Reviews, billing platform, automated appointment booking where customers can schedule window cleaning services directly. So it's very custom information it's giving because it has context. And so what I did is this very first assistant, I just used the message and assistant OpenAI module that's baked into Make. And I said, hey, message James, give him the company information. So I'm mapping all the information that they filled out in that form: company description, problem, budget, timeline, services needed, all this information. Then I'm like, generate 10 ideas based on those details. Now, in all of my examples, I'm giving it how many characters I want it, because one caveat is when you have templates you're trying to populate, you need to control how many words are used so that it's concise. Otherwise, it'll bleed, right? So if you look at this, if this was too big of a description, it's going to bleed over. And that happens sometimes, and you have to kind of tweak it and clean it up a little bit. So that's what I did. And then it gives me a response. Now, when it gives me a response, it also gives me a thread ID. So this first response will give me a thread ID, or basically a conversation, so that any of these other requests are aware of how GPT responded. Now you might be wondering, well, man, why don't you just give GPT everything instead of calling it 8 times? One thing about these language models, they do, at least right now, in my experience, a lot better when you give them small, concise things to do and build upon that, versus giving them 8 things to do. Kind of like a real person, right? If you had a real assistant and you give them like 10 things to do in one go, you might not be as successful as if you just said, hey, give me 10 ideas. Great. Now those 10 ideas you gave me, and I'll walk you through this. I ask it for 10 ideas. Then I say, cool, those 10 ideas that you just gave me, I want you to parse those ideas and give me the JSON equivalent of those ideas, because returned raw text, I can't map into a template. I need to have a structure in Make to do that. So now I'm saying, generate this specific JSON based on that. After that, I'm saying, hey, I want you to generate a dream outcome, but make sure it's less than 425 characters. Right? And all these other steps, I'm passing in thread IDs so that it knows which conversation we're talking about. So if this automation was triggered 10 times and it was in parallel automations going at the same time, it knows which conversation it's keeping track of, which is a nice feature. OpenAI didn't always have that, and you had to hold memory locally versus having threads of conversations. So super nice with assistants, you can have threads. So, okay, it's going to give me a dream outcome. Then I'm going to say, hey, what is a good start? And then I'm going to ask these questions. Now, remember, this request to James with this thread ID, James already knows it's a construction company or a pet store or whatever. So when I'm asking these questions, it knows everything about the company. It knows all the previous responses. So these responses get further and further refined and tight because it knows context of what it's talking about. Same thing with generate timeline. And then same thing with generating keys. So generating keys, of course, is one of those things where it's going to return something. I have to map an array. So now I'm going to parse keys here. And then also generate resources. It's going to give me 3 resources that I can then map. So all these 8 OpenAI modules kind of build upon each other outside of like the give me JSON. 2 of them are give me JSON. The rest are give me custom content. And that custom content will get populated into here. So I think what I'm going to do is actually give it a run so that we can kind of see it and kind of talk through. So I'm just going to click run. I'm going to go to lead magnet. I'm actually going to go to this first one that was already created. And I'm going to click on run automation. And this is actually going to go and in real time kind of take you through the steps. And I just want it to be fully populated so then I can kind of show you these modules with actual data in them so you can see the steps and how I'm working this out. All right, so it looks like our lead magnet is done generating. So what I want to do is kind of take you through it again, and we're going to go down this bottom row and I'll explain a little bit more. So here, of course, I'm getting a record ID. I'm grabbing the record details. Now you'll notice I have a route here. Basically, the automation is going to go down this first path, and then it's going to go down the second path. I just sometimes don't like long automations. That's one super long string. So I took the hit and used a couple more operations to capture variables, because of course, when I set these variables here to basically store the results of the OpenAI processing, basically I'm setting the variable, then I'm storing the results here because none of this bottom path has access to this. It only has access to everything before it. This isn't considered before it, it's considered a different branch. So if I click here and I click anywhere, notice it only has access to the webhook, the Airtable, and those initial variables. It does not have access to any of the other stuff. Also, if I were to click on any of these integrations and click here on the first route, it only has access to these first 3 and then all the OpenAI. It doesn't have access to this bottom route. So I just do it because sometimes it's easier for me to see larger automations. So anyways, in case you're wondering, that's what these variables are. So I'm basically setting these as null values. Then I am populating these values and then I'm calling them here with get multiple variables. Then it's grabbing all the variables that have been set up here, right? So I've got 3 long blocks of text, and then I have a couple JSON breakdowns of that data. So now from here, let me just show you how this data returns actually in this first step. So you'll notice here when I generated ideas, I'm giving it information, notice it's doing the variable swap. So it's saying, hey, this is what we are. This is what we do. Here's our budget. Here's our timeline. It's giving that information, and then the result is going to be, here's 10 automation ideas. Obviously, it's just text. I can't do anything with that. So I had to parse that. So I basically said, hey, parse the following data, and then here's the data that it was given. And then my result is it gives me nice JSON, but still in a string. Okay. So all of these are like that. I'm getting that information. It's swapping out variables if needed, returning a result. I'm storing that here in this set multiple variables module. And then here I'm grabbing those variables and these long strings. Now my next step is obviously, so Google Slides, for instance, this Google slide is going to be this workflow automation guide. And there's a module called Create Presentation from a Template. And when you use this module, when you select the presentation ID or you select the presentation, it's going to look at your specific template, look for anything that's squiggly line like this, and it's going to allow you to swap that with text. So you'll notice here, I've got all these squiggly lines and text here. So for instance, let's just say I updated this and I said, test 1, 2, 3. Well, we'll do 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Right? If I go here in this presentation template and I do a refresh, it's going to look through, but it's going to find test 1, 2, 3, and it's going to say, hey, did you want to replace it with some text? Right? So that's all this create a presentation from template is doing. So I don't want to do that. However, that's how you would do that. So these content ideas and keys, obviously I have to map those individually in the template. So this is where I use a parse JSON module. I just pass it the JSON string. I don't give it a data structure on either of these, and it recognizes and outputs the proper sections for me. So it's like, cool, title content for the 10 ideas and the 3 keys, section. So you'll notice here, I'm mapping all that stuff here. Now, one other caveat when you're building this out, not caveat, but just a little make tip. Make gives you access to previous module variables that have ran in data. However, when you have variables that are arrays, you need to pass it what item you want. So if I were to look for key 1, so here we wanted 3 keys to success, and you'll see it's going to output an array of sections, and there's 3 of them of title content. So 3 collections in this array. But if I go here to map, right, and I look at the keys and the sections, I only have 1 here. So I actually have to put in, and if you don't put it in, it's going to use the first one. You have to put in which array item you want. So let's say in this section, I wanted to put the 3rd array. I'd have to click this, which will bring me sections, title, and I'd have to put a 3 here saying, I want the 3rd item in this array, the 3rd item's title, and then it'll return the 3rd item's title. So it doesn't show it to you. You just have to kind of know that. And that's why you'll see key 1 is here, and then key 2 and key 3. And there's even a bug here because in this sample one I did the other day, because notice this is section 1 title, I'm not putting an array for the content like I should. So this should be a 2 and this should be a 3. And I bet if I look at the example one that's in there, if I go here, go to data, and I click on this generated magnet, I bet that's probably going to be all the same. Yep. So notice here in that first slide, clear communications, iterative testing, and continuous learning were the keys to success. But notice these are just headers. The details of how to execute that are all the same because I never put in that array in this sample example. So anyways, you want to do that. So I didn't do that. And so that's where you do section 2, section 3, because I added 2 different modules. I did section title, I did a manual colon, and then section 3 content. Anyways, you get the point. Otherwise, I mapped company name. I mapped all these other content titles, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I added the budget and the resource. The only other thing I do here that's special is I mark this as shared. And then basically when this returns value here, I use the presentation ID. So I get this Google Drive get a share link configuration, and I basically pass in the file ID of this presentation slide, and I change the type to anyone, and then I turn file discovery off, but I say anyone. So you basically, it allows that share link to be accessed by anyone who clicks it. Then I simply go to Airtable and I say, hey, guess what? Our lead magnet's done. Do a couple of things. Change the status to ready to review. Add in the link for the generated lead magnet. And I believe those are the only 2 things I do. So the last step in our automation. So now if we are looking at the guide, maybe I lost it. I closed that. Oh, here we go. I'm blind. So now we've updated Airtable. We didn't actually download the guide. We got the link. So this is more like get guide link. And then we updated Airtable with that link. And then notify team member for review, email value. So in Airtable, I created a ready for review view. All I did is I clicked on the grid view, ready for review. I didn't care about having all these fields, so I just clicked on hide fields, hide all. And I said, I just want to see the generated lead magnet, an approved button, and that's it. Potentially, if you're checking to see if people are being legit, you might have some of this stuff so that you just see that people aren't just saying nonsensical stuff. But essentially, I'm going to click on this lead magnet to see how it looks. I'm going to click on it and be like, hey, does this look legit? Cool, it does. And then essentially, I'm just going to check approved. And there's one more automation that was built out that's called send to lead. And how I built that, I'll just redo it. I simply said, when a record is updated, and we're going to select the record, leads from the ready for review screen, and we're going to select approved. When anybody checks the box approved, I want you to send an email, and we want to send an email to that person. So we're going to select the email address, subject, your lead magnet has arrived. And then for our markdown, we're going to say, here you go, enjoy. And we're going to, let's see, I think it's like this. Lead magnet, this is markdown. And I think I want to put the URL. So here's the generated lead magnet URL. let me see if I can preview this. Generate a preview. Nope. So almost. Here's the email preview, but I think I need to add this. This has to be a link. Let me generate a preview again. No, is it backwards? Hold on. Let me click on. Sometimes you need documentation. Let me just click on hyperlinks. No, that was right. Oh, it's backwards. That's what it was. All right, now we're going to generate a preview. There we go. So it's going to say, here you go, enjoy. Lead magnet, you're going to click it, and it's going to open up that lead for them, lead magnet. So that is the system. So that's how it works. There's a couple things, again, when you're doing this yourself, the things that took me the most time were the prompting. When I built all those prompts and wanted to get really concise, I did two things. Number one is I built my slide template of what the value was that I wanted, and I did a human version of it. So I went through, I said, I want to automate something good that I would do as a person, but I just don't have enough bandwidth to do, but it would add value from that perspective. So I created a manual version of an automation guide. And then once I did that, I looked at the sections, I looked how it was broken down. I said, okay, great. Now that I made this human lead magnet, this is the amount of characters that are acceptable. Titling, these type of sections, how large can they be? Those were things that I was massaging a little bit as I went along, just to figure out what that looked like. From there, before I built any automation, I went into the assistant and I started messaging the assistant that information. So for example, let's take this first step where I message the assistant that first piece of information. What I did is I didn't use these modules. I went in here as an assistant first, and then I put this in. And then I clicked run to see what it would respond with. Then it responded with information, right? And so once it responded with information, I'm like, okay, great, that's amazing. However, I need the JSON version of this, right? So then I started messing around with prompts that got me the JSON version of that, which would be this parse content ideas, where I'm saying parse the following text with content. So I did these type of steps is kind of how I worked through that. So once I did that and I started having conversations and seeing how it responded, let's see, parse the above 10 responses. That was weird. I must have pressed the wrong button. Oh, it's running. So that's what I did. and then I got it perfect to how I wanted. And then I'm like, okay, cool. So this verbiage and this wordage gave me what I wanted. And then that's kind of how I stepped through and built it. So I built it in the playground first, and then I built it through those modules. But again, I did find when I would ask it something like this, and on top, and then after that, say with those 10 ideas, then, return JSON and then do this and do that. Like, the output would be crazy to get all of this output in one prompt in some sort of complex JSON to then map. So I just did it individually. It seemed to work out a lot better. So that's what I did. Now, this is also super flexible. So for me, I had the results go into Google Drive link. That's for this example. If you look at like an agency version of what I did, it's slightly different, right? So I'm using HubSpot as that CRM. I'm actually emailing back out through HubSpot. I'm not actually sending, as an agency, I'm not going to send an Airtable email. So it's going to go out through HubSpot for attribution and other needs. So I'm using HubSpot for that. You'll notice I'm storing the documents in S3. So I'm not storing the documents in Google Drive. I'm actually downloading it and then uploading it to S3 as a link, because S3 is a better data store, in my opinion, than Google Drive for lots of files. On top of, you could use like DigitalOcean Spaces as well. Like, those are kind of like good document stores for like AI generated content versus like a bunch of Google Drive links. So I actually got the link and then I downloaded it and then I actually uploaded an actual file, not a link to a file. So this is an actual file, not a link to a file. This is an actual PDF that they have, right? Another thing that I did with mine that's slightly different is a Slack message. I'm not going to be, in this base all the time. So I wanted a Slack message, and a text message to the team when someone filled this out so that we could immediately go into the base, validate whether it was legit or not, and then confirm. So they didn't have to wait days and days to get a response. And we didn't have to just keep checking this Airtable base to see what happened and when it happened, but we'd get a message. So, but this could be anything. I mean, this could be, I don't know, Microsoft Teams. It could be an email to somebody or a group, or I don't know, a bat signal, whatever you want. You can kind of like build it out and customize something like this as you want. So this is mine. I look forward to what you build with it. Drop something in the comments. Let me know how it's going. I will have a link somewhere where you can actually download these resources so you can kind of see what I see. All these prompts I included for you, no secrets. You'll see there is a resource site, and I have all of this stuff here. So you'll be able to follow along, click the link, and you can see every single prompt that I used in this integration as well. So anyways, hope this was useful. Most of my comment is around AI, Airtable Make, marketing automation. So look forward to seeing you around, and I will see you in the next video.